Man, my first instinct is humility. I think when you can see someone that's functioning well, but is trying to see their blind spots and recognizing that they don't have it all figured out, not like self deprecation or a false humility, but just a legitimate, humble approach to their work. They're not worried about how this looks to not how they look. I think they want to do right by the people that they're taking care of. And I think that's the first thing I thought of for sure.
Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities. Welcome back to the Unleashing Leaders podcast. You guys, today I am super excited to be joined by someone who's become a dear friend, a co-mentor. I think we've mentored each other through a few challenging circumstances in our lives, and just a great guy. His name is Jesse Mix. It plays a dual role as more and more people in our world today are operating in. Part of his life is as the primary care and emergency room physician at the Boise Veterans Affairs Medical Center. He's been doing that for about 13 years in his career, but 5 years here in town. He is based out of Boise, Idaho, where I'm at the moment, and so really appreciate that. Jesse also serves our nation. By the way, happy Veterans Day. That was just a few days ago as we're recording this. He has been with the National Guard. He's a lieutenant colonel and flight surgeon, serving primarily as the medical officer for one of the pararescue squadrons. That's the PJs, which I was talking to my PJ brother-in-law on Veterans Day as well, too. So saluting all those folks in uniform. The PJs, for those of you that don't know, those are the special forces that go rescue the other special forces when they get in over their heads. And Jesse is the medical officer to make sure that they stay alive long enough that they can patch them up and get them back. So pretty darn cool stuff that you get to do. And yet at the same time, just one of the nicest, down-to-earth, approachable dudes I've ever met. So Jesse, it is great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Lee. I am nervous to be here. I've only done one other podcast, and I was equally unqualified in that regard as well. So
I listened to that. I loved it. That was the Backcountry podcast, right?
Yeah, it was medical stuff, but on a hunting podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, I have no business being here. And now on a leadership podcast, I feel the exact same way.
You play that imposter card just nice, but we all know it's bullcrap. I did learn some great things, even having been an EMT for many years. So I was like, oh yeah, so I updated my internal SOPs based on that episode. So I'm sure I will update my leadership SOPs on our conversation today too, Jesse. Well, Jesse, and again, Jesse was also a past president of the Leadership Boise program, which is where we got to work together during a very tumultuous and challenging transition era in the program, which has gone on to do really, it was great. It was great when we did it, and it's just continued to blossom. So, but today, Jesse and I have kind of a special treat for you. The topic is leading chaos monsters. This could be probably one of the best all-time episodes just for the title alone, Jesse. Hopefully you and I don't totally jack it up. But the scenario, as Jesse will fill us in on, is, maybe as a volunteer, or maybe you're leading up and, you're trying to exercise a level of, maturity or discipline or effectiveness as a leader based on, your training, your instincts, whatever. And you've got, maybe they're well-meaning, maybe they're otherwise nice folks, but man, they just stir the pot. And we've all dealt with this. You've had a couple of really good doozies. And for full disclosure, we're going to kind of amalgamate some of the stories to keep the guilty innocent until proven otherwise. So, Jesse, first of all, tell us a little bit more about kind of your background, your career. What are you doing, and how do you juggle two careers like that? I think that's just fascinating in its own right.
I appreciate you having me on, Lee. It is a juggle. You're right about that. I would say brief background is I grew up in Pennsylvania, went to schools. Actually, my dad was a doctor, and I grew up saying, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I just know I don't want to be a doctor. And then like a moth to a flame, somehow it happened. And I didn't want to get into a bunch of debt. And so I that's when I started looking at the military for the first time was, will they pay? Because they're one of the few games in town that will pay for med school. So
Yeah, it's a great program. I do highly recommend it.
yeah, it's the Air Force kept me out of about 400 and probably ranging up to 600K in debt, which I'm very grateful. And then also gave me just tons of exposure to these kind of things that,
Immediate exposure at a caliber and level and a rate with reps that you just can't get anywhere else.
yeah. And then to be able to get into the pararescue PJ side of things has been just like such an exciting part of life. I am not a PJ, to be clear. I am not one of the cool guys. I just support
Well,
the cool
you
guys.
train the cool guys on so that they're they're not just soldiers. They're the ultimate EMTs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they truly are. They're highly impressive group of guys, including your brother-in-law. So let's see the balance of it. Active duty, it felt less of a balance because when I'm doing it active duty, that's your full-time job. But then when you go in the guard, I didn't at the time, I didn't really realize in the guard, you're like, they're just part-time mil, but really what they are is like full-time civilian part-time mil. And you, by the way, are still held to the same readiness standards that all the active guys are. And so, man, just so much respect for the National Guard and the reservists. Very similar.
Such an important part of our military structure, and again, great career development. We're gonna have another guest on here soon, similar situation, and you're serving your community. It's truly an honor, and it's not for everybody. You got to have your act together.
Yeah, it's anyway, a real honor to be able to do it. I think it does feel like a juggle. Luckily, I mean, obviously working at the VA, they have nothing but understanding for guardsmen and service members in general. And so I would say I probably have it easier than most in terms of balancing the professional life in the civilian world and also in the military world. So I'm grateful for my setup here. I think my wife has to put up with a lot, so I'm also grateful for her. She's doing as much or more of the balancing than I am, certainly. So
Yeah, and father of two kids as well, right? So the old adage, well, you can't have it all, and it's like, well, you can. You just gotta take some time, and you can't have it all at once, right? You got to kind of spread it out a little bit and do some juggling.
yeah, you can't have it all at once. That's a good way to say it. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, great. Well, we've got a couple of examples here, and what's kind of neat is one of the examples doesn't have anything to do with either of these jobs because and this is true for many of us, right? We might be a parent, we might be a child, we might be a sibling. We're members of our community. We have professional careers. So tell us a little bit about a community-based organization that you were involved with as a volunteer, right? And I think if you really want to get good at leadership, lead volunteers, right? Because you got no stripes, you got no pay, you got nothing. Like the only thing you got is leadership. I mean, that will strip you down bare.
So true. Man, I learned that maybe not the first time, but I learned that very well with you, Lee. You were president over me. And as I was vice president, I was like, oh my gosh, how do we even get how do you herd cats when you're not actually paying them? You have no ability to fire them. If they're doing this on the beauty of their own time and their own effort, it is tough. It is tough. LVU was a great experience, but this is not that organization. I want to talk about a different organization. And essentially I found myself involved with this organization kind of coming in a number of years back. And eventually I was on what ended up being the board of this nonprofit, essentially. The president of the board had been in place for a long time, and under him, this organization had grown from, I don't know, 30 or 40 up to, say, around 120, 140, 140 people. And I kind of come in at this place
and we all know when you scale an organization like that, the first 10 has one set of problems, like 10 to 50 has another set of problems, 50 to 100, that you go through some transformation, even just regardless of industry based on that scale.
Yeah, that's something I've always admired about you, Lee, is in LB, it's like you can take an organizational problem and basically turn it into a formula. And I'm like, how do you know this? And it's like it makes it so clear and straightforward when you're able to do that. I still have trouble doing that. But I have always respected that about you. But you're right. So basically, this guy came in and was the right guy at the right time to take this organization, what is that, 3 or 4 or 5x. But then we're running into this set of problems now that I'm on the board, that it's not that he's the wrong leader for this organization. It's just that the skills that brought him to that level are now at a totally different level. Um, and so functionally, what I would try to simplify it as I've thought about it over time is like, he is extremely relationally oriented, and the way that he was able to bring people to the table and uh, organize around a vision was very much relational, one-on-one, one in a group of people relationships, where he was the one that was fostering all those connections. And I think there's like a well-known, or maybe it's well-known, I don't know, I think I've heard it once or twice, you would know better, somewhere around like the a person has around 150 deep, meaningful connections before things start kind of fraying. Is that, can you?
Yeah, there's kind of a personal max, and there's also a social max. A community that has more than 500 members, it really strains the ability of organic connections to maintain that cohesion. And that's where, so the level of structures that are needed to have those things not spiral out of control, it's pretty well established at those thresholds. But yeah, for an individual, yeah, boy, 20 is good, 50 is great, 100 is like you're hitting theoretical maxes there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. And so in this organization, that's the kind of transition point we're at, where it's like, oh, what we need is actually uh the relationship game brought us this, certainly by a long shot, and is really truly in the ethos of the organization overall. And it's a wonderful thing. And that's why most people would say they're there, I think. But really what is needed is processes in place, structure, kind of organizational development to help build the structure around, and also kind of less of a reliance on that one guy doing the relationship thing to help grow this thing, right?
And that can become a real impediment because, now, you have key player risks involved with this. You have translation errors that start to show up. So tell, what were some of the symptoms that presented, when you're at this point, as you're like, well, yes, you could see what's needed is X, but what were the symptoms that were creating chaos, for lack of a better word?
I guess what I would say is, as I'm talking about this, I'm talking about it almost past tense, because it functionally is right now. So I'm talking about it with a degree of hindsight that I did not have at the time. So like I said, I'm not able to diagnose or turn into a math equation organizational problems the same as quickly as you are. So it probably took me a year or two. I'd say, all right, let's be honest, it was like almost 2 before I was like, what is going on? And I think I kind of tapped into it at that point. But the symptoms is what I was observing and feeling like, this is crazy. So it was just like, it was as if you're just trying to play that relationship game harder and faster, right? And so you just got to like meet more people. And so functionally what was happening is the relational capital that he was trying to build was getting thinner and thinner, and he was getting thinner and thinner, and basically getting very burnt out, trying to just pedal faster, right? Just go harder. And so what it looked like from the board standpoint was just a lot of just like very scattered shot, do a thing, not even really a process thing. I'll just go talk to this person, and just kind of like just wanting to take everything on to himself so he can just go talk to the one person, and make, patch it up or fix it out or address this problem or whatever it was. And so it just felt so chaotic over time. And it was just like, what it feels like without being able to pin it down at the time is like, this feels like I am scrambling to keep up with this person who's running 1,000 miles an hour in a fast little tight circle, and we
tornado
are
of directions. Yeah.
It's just creating this, exactly, almost this cyclone, like a little chaos monster is what it felt like. Yeah.
Well, and again, when we say this, we're not saying this is just a jerk, right? But it's just like, it's creating uncertainty, it's creating churn, it's creating spin, and it's, and we all have some of that, but it's just like, boy, it's really hitting, an unnecessary threshold. And you're right. What happens is, in that moment, he's like, wait a minute, in the past, when I had uncertainty or whatever, I could just layer enough relationship on it, we'd be fine. And, but you reach a point of diminishing returns with everything in this world, and it just wasn't keeping up. And now it was creating more challenges than it was solving. Now you were describing to me though, Jesse, there was a point where this leader started to recognize this and went so far as even to bring in an operations person to try to say, hey, you know what? I realize we need to start systematizing and processing and whatnot. And, but that's easier said than done.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that was about 2 years into my time. Like I said, it took me quite some time to figure out, okay, this is what I think is happening. And we'll kind of come towards like I was able to develop a really good relationship. And so actually maybe through relationally with me impacting him to be able to say like, look, this can't be all on you. This cannot be like this ship cannot rise and fall exclusively with you. And by the way, we're just spinning. The ship is just spinning right now. So it took a while to build that relationship to be able to, and to recognize it. So we kind of get to this point where I realize, we could benefit from, and I think not only that, but also afford someone to start running operations, day-to-day stuff. So you don't have to, and we pull together a job description, interview, hire, find a great candidate for the job. Is just like, man, this actually worked out better than I thought it would from finding the right person, fit in the right piece. But the president has been doing this for, what is it now? 7 years at that time, all by his lonesome.
And that role, and plus all the years prior to that, right? Yeah. Yeah.
And then you bring in someone who's supposed to take over the day-to-day operations to just offload him so he can, take a step back, breathe, and, work on the next phase of the organization. But man, he's been doing the day-to-day stuff for so long. He just cannot stay out of it. I'm sure anyone listening knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, hey, look, man, I've been on both ends of this transaction, so I'm laughing on both sides. It is not a personality. It is just a role thing. My COO, Fritzig, is rolling over laughing right. He's like, yeah, you do this to me all the time. And I'm like, man, come on, it's your turn. I had to deal with it for my last guy.
That's right. And so like, there's a degree of understanding there, certainly. But man, what ends up happening, because what was happening before is external, we'd have some sort of committee on something, right? And so we get someone in charge. I was like, okay, this is the right person. And that person goes out and sets up their committee. However, they invite someone on the committee and they were like, oh, I thought 2 years ago I was asked to lead basically this exact committee. I was like, wait. And so it's like again, we're just going
duplication of effort, role confusion. Yeah.
And so then this exact thing was in the external context of the organization. You come inside to the president and now the operations manager, and it's like, they're just the manager's trying to do her job, and the president just doesn't know how to not.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't let go of it. Yeah.
There's got to be some reality to this that I think you would probably speak to in terms of sometimes it's just, well, one, it's easier to do the job you've done for so long. And then two, it's like, it's almost easier to be busy than to take a step back and maybe find the next phase, the leadership, the vision part of it. I don't know if there's probably some truism,
there's so much. Yeah. I mean, it's such a normal pattern. I mean, if you're longtime listeners of the show, you guys, what we're talking about here. There's the first inclination when you're more responsible for larger goals is to do it yourself, right? And to a degree, most of us are working managers, right? We don't just get to sit and pontificate in some ivory tower, but it's all about that balance, right? And it's like being able to know how to let go, how fast to let go, who to let go to, when to let go to, which parts to let go of, which parts you should never let go of. That's got to be with you. And, that all takes, if you're doing it by trial and error, it takes longer. And you have more trial and error, and it creates more pain and suffering, right? But the degree to which you can say like, oh, wait a second, right? There's patterns here. And that's what I love about this show is that, we hear from so many different leaders like yourself, practitioners. And let's be honest,
don't you ever knock yourself, brother. Your natural instincts for this stuff are so amazing. It's been great to watch. But you're right. You're just like, what the heck's going on? And they're like, but they said they want this, but they won't let go of it. And you're like, do I have to pry it from your cold, dead hands, man? Like, what the heck? And it's like, no, do this. And you're well, then let go. And then you're like, well, I guess you don't want me to. And I was like, no, please take it from me. And it's this weird balancing act. So, as we roll the clock forward a little bit, what were some of the things that ended up helping to transform this, to help decouple it, to help get those structures and disciplines starting to show up, so it was less of a chaotic cult of personality?
Yeah. I would say a couple things. Certainly just time over, as he gets a little bit of practice not being day-to-day operations, that's beneficial. By no means do I think it is entirely fixed, but that's okay.
No, but it's progress. It's never perfect, right? Yeah, progress.
So certainly time. I think kind of internal with the manager, it was just, a series of conversations about like, I think in her case, feeling comfortable to tell him like, these are the ways in which you need to let me do my job. And so being able to speak up in that way, or lead up, I guess, as you would say.
And that takes a lot of courage, but remember, you were asked to do it in the first place. So, never be a jerk about it. Never be like, listen, you dummy, you said this and now you're not, you're a giant hypocrite. Like that's not going to go over well. But to be able to just say, hey, let me help you achieve our shared goals by letting me leverage my strengths, and serving you. And that'll, and that, a person who's got a habit, what you're competing with is their neocortex that logically understands that and says, well, yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. And at the same time, you got a dopamine addiction that's like, but when I jump in and I do it, or I have that relationship, I'm getting certainty and connection and contribution and variety. So it's like, you've got a drug that's hitting on like 7 receptors. And it's just like, man, that fills me up. And you're now saying, don't use that drug. Now use a different drug, which is empower and delegate through others. It takes a little while to wean. It's like trying to get somebody off a heroin addiction. You're like, yes, I know it's bad for me, but I need help, literally decoupling that addiction.
Wow. I haven't done neuroscience in probably like 15 years, but that was a good refresher.
Yeah, a little quick refresher. Yeah.
I think another thing that helped reduce the chaos was, in my position on the board, I was able to take over a lot of the meetings. And what I mean by that is he let me start setting the agendas, and then just running literally just like the functionality of getting through the agenda. Right. And in doing that, it wasn't this automatic, this is a thing. Okay, I'll just do it. Okay. He can kind of take a step back and realize like, I can take a degree of separation. And it's this really unusual, very small thing that I did that I think actually made a difference in terms of giving him some space from just the tasking that he was so addicted to, I think.
Yep. And to know that it will be handled well. And, that's where a good way of translating that tactic for other folks is, maybe if you're trying to elevate other leaders in your organization, on your team, yeah, rotate who is the team meeting facilitator, for example. Right. Or, hire an external, vendor for, to support some facilitation of that. So you can be a participant. That gets a little pricey. It's not always the right thing. But if you need one, unleashingleaders.com is available on, callers are standing by. But you can tap other folks to be able to say, hey, provide a little bit of that. You got to interrupt the pattern, right? If you're running the meeting, you're doing the task, or this, that, and the other, and you're not letting anybody else touch the steering wheel at all, there's no space. So we had somebody from underneath leading up saying, hey, I'm going to take these from you. You, as a volunteer board member, was like, look, I'm going to take some of these. I'm going to do it well. That now interrupts that there's some space. And you're like, okay, we'll find out how you get to now do more of your magic instead of being bogged down by this.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair summary of where it is. And I'm not being on that anymore and being a little bit removed from it. I think that's probably about where it's at right now, and probably continues to improve. But that was just this kind of that era of chaos, I think, felt like it had passed. And then I think additionally, what I would say is maybe one additional thing is finally once I recognized this kind of pattern at play, I was like, and it was coming up time for me to move on from the board. It was like, okay, who's the right fit? What does the board need right now? Not just to like be the right personality, but also like who has the right mix of character or uh, skills or organizational management skills. And when I started asking that question, it became very clear to me, like, oh, there's exactly one person that I would really love if he's willing to take it on. And he didn't handed it off. And honestly, I was like, within one meeting, I was like, ah, man, he makes me look like a chump, and this is perfect. I can just like exit stage left and be good, you know? So I think maybe that kind of succession planning in a very small way that I was able to participate in.
Well, to know the kind of context, one of the books that I've got dog-eared and tattered is called The First 90 Days. And it's more than just the first 90 days, but there's a model in there that shows like the different types of context in which leaders operate. And that he uses actually a physician model. It's like, well, you have your ER physician, which you are, and it's like hemorrhaging, blood spurting everywhere. You're just like, stop the blood loss, splint this, get through the night, stabilize. Right. Versus the kind of physician is like, hey, this is a long-term treatment, therapeutic versus like, rehabilitation specialist where it's like, okay, hey, we're trying to restore function. And so he kind of uses that metaphor. But yeah, first 90 days. When you're in a situation, being intentional when you're recruiting board members or leadership positions to say, what is the right kind of doctor I need right now? Do I need a PJ, stuffing leaves in my grill to get me to the helicopter? Or do I need like a really kind patient, rehab person that's going to restore my flexibility? And both are important, right? But time and place.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Well, speaking of that, let's go to this other example. I know I don't want to manage our time, but so you would think that this will only work, that you only see this pattern when you're in a, volunteer nonprofit. You would never see this in the well-disciplined, well-oiled machine that is the military of the United States. Yeah, everything's SOP'd and it's structured. Tell us about that example.
So past unit, certainly not a unit I'm involved with now. It may be just something I imagine. Maybe it's not even a real unit.
It was kind of a blend of movies that, went into a dream state. Yeah. Yeah.
So functionally, my job as a medical director is to oversee all of the medical training and then treatment that PJs are doing, because they're all certified paramedics in addition to 100 other certifications they maintain. So medicine is just one small piece of their job, but they are excellent at it. They're truly remarkable people, and remarkable paramedics. So that's my job and I was at this a unit that I was at previously. What I was finding is that even though I reported directly to the commander, the director of operations, functionally the operations manager at that unit, was just really starting to really just started to step in to just make decisions for me. I think part of that was in part because he was full-time and I was a part-time guardsman. So he was there when decisions need to be made. He was also not medical, even remotely. And then I was like, man, why is this happening? We talked about it several times. And then what I figured out is that the entire unit was feeling like they were in this kind of like chaotic cyclone because of the commander. And I was a bit removed from that, just in my little medical corner. And functionally speaking, you have this chaos monster at the top who, as a commander of a full unit of hundreds of people, is still operating in the same way that he was operating when he was the flight commander over 10 guys on his team, right? Because he's a special operator himself. And so he was an excellent leader at the small team level, but now here he is, having promoted up over time, but really not with much transition time between, just by the nature of the way it works in the military sometimes. Now he's in charge of hundreds, and he is still trying to manage it the exact same way that he was managing his, 5 to 10 guys that he was in charge of, which is which ends up playing out as just total micromanagement. So he is hitting down and taking all sorts of decisions. And basically what happens is this trickle effect through the whole squadron, where it kind of was, I don't know, toxic is a strong word, but it affected the whole squadron.
It's disruptive. Yeah, it was disruptive.
Yeah. So he's, as he is getting into probably several layers below his level of decision making, what he's doing is taking that ability for those leaders at that level to start to be making their decisions, and they start operating down and taking it from below them. And I think that was functionally, I was actually 2 layers down in that process, where it's like, these are exclusively medical decisions that you are making as a totally non-medical person, but it was a reaction to just getting absolutely micromanaged by this commander who is not necessarily equipped to lead, hundreds at that level.
At that scale. Yeah, it's a different flavor. And then what were some of the consequences of that? You said it was disruptive, but what were some of the results? Like, did it affect, mission readiness? Did it affect retention? Did it affect morale? Did it affect, I don't know, your supplies budget? What were some of the associated symptoms?
Yeah, I would say hopefully, and in this case, it was true that readiness is usually the last thing affected in a unit, because that is by far the biggest thing. It's like you have to be ready to go. And so that was not affected. What I would say,
but that was because that was the heroics of the individuals preserving that. So you take all these other hits and you're protecting that. But if you take too many of those away, now readiness will be effective. And in your guys' case, readiness is the bottom line. In the private business, profitability, customer retention, and growth might be the bottom line. So there's different equivalents, but you're right. You protect that. But if you lose these other things, you're just getting closer and closer to that artery, and you do not want to touch the arteries.
Man, see, you did it again. That is that is exactly what was happening, because some of the other stuff you mentioned, morale was tanked, and then retention started tanking to the point where, it was not the only reason. It was a reason that I ended up leaving that unit. And when I left, my exit interview with you're required to do an exit interview with someone who's totally removed from the squadron. And he's like, hey, the wing commander at the highest level of the base wants me to ask this question, like, why is this unit losing so many people? It is very unusual.
Yeah. We're talking about elite fighting force, where usually that's the destination, that's the pickle, that's where people want to be. And so you're like, wait a second, if we're losing that, and, I will tell you, it is almost always the leader. Yeah. Who's running that shop? Maybe some people move because of, family and life and career changes. If you're seeing more than a trickle, there is a absolute behavioral issue.
Yeah. And that's exactly what was going on. And it was being noticed at the highest levels of that base, let alone the squadron, And so I did what I could. I had multiple very serious conversations with people who outranked me, and was like, look, this is not okay. This is not appropriate. This is what I'm observing in the squadron. This is what I observe of morale. I think this is what's going on. It did not make a difference, and I ended up leaving the unit for that and other reasons as well.
Would you mind, though? It didn't work, not because you said it. It didn't work because it wasn't going to work, probably. Needed to be said by somebody differently. But could you share with us, what was one way that you approached that conversation? Because I think for a lot of folks, the idea of, talking to somebody, in the military, much higher rank than you, and a civilian, higher title than you, how did you approach that conversation to say, with all due respect, I'm seeing a risk, I want to draw our attention to it, without sounding like some whiny, mamby-pamby dude?
Man, that was exactly what I was trying to do. I don't know how it came off.
Well, how did you intro it? How did you say it? Yeah, just give us a taste of that.
Yeah, in that world, in special operations world, you have to be very direct. You don't like a compliment sandwich anything. If you're going to give feedback, it is going to be critical and also important. But so I basically it wasn't just in passing comments. It was like a series of very deliberate meetings that I would set up and be like, hey, I want to talk to you about some problems I'm seeing in the youth. I want to talk to you about the way that my job is being affected, I think, in part because of what you're doing. And it wasn't actually I did actually also have this conversation with the guy above me, who's the director of operations, totally good dude. And actually, I think he's probably in a different position and leading well now, so we had those conversations, but I also went up just to the commander, which I think I maybe had a little bit of that right to do, because in the medical lane, I was directly below him, just in that medical way. Um, and he was taken off guard multiple times. I don't think anybody, oh, I don't know of anybody else that was doing that. I do think people were probably
Trying. Yeah. Yeah.
trying, but man, it was just a reality of being like, at some point you're like, well, if I'm going, like, what am I trying to save? And so I actually I hadn't made up my mind to leave for quite some time in it, until it was just probably about a year of realizing like, this isn't actually
Yeah.
changing.
It's not going to change. Well, I want to do that thing you keep complimenting on, but just if you unpack that, it started with being deliberate about the invitation, right? It's not just like you catch them in passing or you shoot some big old long Jerry Maguire email that says, these are all the problems I want to, scathe you. It's like, I'd like to have a thoughtful conversation around X. Right. So you said I had to set it. And so then you've got their attention. We know this is serious. Then you don't compliment sandwich. It's like, oh, there's all these wonderful things. It's like, hey, this is one aspect. And I like you used an I statement. You're like, this is how it's affecting my ability to perform. This is how it's affecting our unit's ability to achieve our goals. So you describe the impact of what's happening. And I think it's at least in part associated with this behavior, this pattern, this whatever it is, right? And so now you're very thoughtfully, very logically describing it, but also being humble, and that has a huge penetrative factor. I mean, I think that's a very influential to say it, and I don't think it's specific. Now in the military, you might be more direct about it, but I think even in a civilian application, to be able to say, set the table or do the invitation, set the table. I'm talking about this context. Here's the impact I'm seeing. These are the behaviors I think that are precipitating it. And here's here's some alternatives. Here's some recommendations. And here's some examples. I think that's very, very powerful. Now, to your point, yeah, some people may not have laid it out that before, or they may think they've been successful because of what they're doing, not in spite of what they're doing. And it might take a few rounds of that to kind of penetrate. But I think that's given them the best odds. And then to your point, folks are like, but what if that doesn't work? I'm like, every job is a volunteer job. At some point you're volunteering. Are you going to re-enlist? Are you going to re-up? Are you going to, do you vote with your feet? So if you're like, look, I've made my contribution. I've done what I could. This is not the right place for me right now. I think that is not quitting. That is choosing to go where you can be more effective. It's the same thing if you're attacking bad guys in a situation. You're like, I don't have the right ground. Right? I'm going to choose a different angle so that I can have a better angle of attack in a different role with a different unit, a different job, different employer, whatever. And I think that just staying with it forever is also not wise. So you demonstrated in that story a good balance of, be thoughtful about it, get some information, formulate, have an intervention or two, and then if that's not working, change you. You go somewhere else.
Yeah, I think there was also some component of, I felt like there really weren't that many people in the unit who would have the ability to say it, just the nature of a extreme hierarchy, but I felt like I had enough, just the nature of, I don't know, flight dog in the military unit, which is just the structure that we were in. It was like, there's a lot of people who are hurting or who are very much affected by this, and it wasn't like I was just like, oh, I'm just going to
I'm the union spokesperson. I'm going to go, on behalf of everybody else, I've self-anointed myself. Yeah, don't be that guy. Nobody likes that guy. But again, you said this is affecting my role, and that's how you start. It's like, well, is this affecting other people too? It's like, well, yeah, but you're going to have to talk to them. But this is affecting my role, and that is therefore affecting A, B, and C. Yeah. Well, it's a great way to go about doing it. So, and so I like the the tale of these two stories, Jesse. One tells, volunteer context. You made some effort, but you did have some rank in the volunteer context, right? You were a board member. This was a president. But still, how did you help, recognize those symptoms, make those interventions, partner with the other folks there to kind of make that move in a different direction, and then replace yourself with the right kind of leader that could continue that. In another case, you recognize the pattern, you kind of realize what you did, you made thoughtful interventions, and you're like, all right, well, that's not getting the traction I need. This isn't the place for me right now. So then you removed yourself from the equation. I think both of those are very viable strategies for how to lead chaos monsters.
Yeah, it was a funny thing these were playing out nearly simultaneously, in many ways.
Like what a great, see, that's the nice thing about a dual career is you have these two laboratories you get to learn from in parallel.
True. And I think that may have been part of the reason it took me so long to figure out what was going on, because it felt like I'm getting spun in two different circles here, and I don't even know which way is up.
Wait a second. Well, maybe the real common denominator of you. They're all like, I want to hear the other side of the story. Like, there was this guy, he was this doc, and he was nuts, and he didn't know what he was doing, and so I had to micromanage him. And
I bet that's the exact story you would get.
Probably. It's amazing how we can rationalize it. Well, this is great. Well, Jesse, I want to thank you for taking the time to be on the show. Like I said, I know this is not your most comfortable thing to do, but part of the show is showing people that leaders come in all shapes, sizes, all the good stuff. So you're really a great role model of it. And these are all situations, I hear of them all the time, so it definitely was not just you, brother. And you're like, what do I do? And I'll tell you, just suffering in silence is not your best strategy. So you could do it with bravado and blow it up, and that's not so great either. But there is a thoughtful way to try to navigate it, influence, nudge, to at least dampen the detrimental effects and help them grow, right? Because we're all unaware of our own blind spots, myself and you included. So this has been really helpful for those that are wanting to keep an eye out or look for other random podcasts that you might be on. How can people stay in touch with you, Jesse? Are you a LinkedIn guy? Do you have a massive consultancy that you can be for hire? Public speaking. What's your handle?
I have a cell phone number and an email. I'm not on any of the other things, so it's hard to keep tabs on me, which is probably what I was hoping for.
But you're a spec op guy, man. You gotta be behind the scenes. No, so yeah, didn't know if you're on LinkedIn or you had anything.
No, honestly, I'm not. But I'm happy to anyone that wants to reach out. Happy to talk with them. But honestly, it's an honor to be on here, and usually I try to keep a low profile, so I'm pretty uncomfortable right now.
I know. I'm blowing your cover right now, so you're now no longer able to be an operator. So one last question I'd like to ask you, Jesse, which is a question a friend of mine I was just talking with earlier today, Darren Verasamy, one of our earlier podcast guests, but we've known each other for years. Great guy. He gave me this idea, so I do it with all of our guests. So I'll ask you the question and just take a moment to think about it and then give us your answer. There's many right answers, but there's also some really dumb, wrong answers. So I'm sure you won't hit any of those. So the question is, for these stories or any other for that matter, what is one aspect or one dimension that is a clue to you that somebody's operating as an unleashed leader, right? Kind of the opposite of what you just described here today. What's one dimension of that you would say, like, hey, be on the look for this, aspire to that, or be mindful of this? What's one dimension that you would highlight?
Man, my first instinct is humility. I think when you can see someone that's functioning well, but is trying to see their blind spots and recognizing that they don't have it all figured out. I think not like self-deprecation or a false humility, but just a legitimate, humble approach to their work. I think that's when okay, someone is, they're not worried about how this looks, to not how they look. I think they want to do right by the people that they're taking care of. And I think that's the first thing I thought of for sure.
Well, no, that's a great one. And you're right. It takes tremendous amount of confidence to be that humble, right? To like, no, I know I'm squared away in these realms and I am absolutely committed to learning in these other ones. And, I want to know, and I don't want to operate where I'm blind to that, or I'm tone deaf to that. So how do I keep that feedback loop open? And that to me, that's the gateway to everything else, right? If you can do that, it doesn't matter what you don't know, you will learn it, right? But if you don't have that, if you're closed off, I don't care how smart or skilled or talented or good looking you are, you just, that's it. You're tapped out. You ain't going to get any better than that. So
I didn't know you were a marriage therapist, Lee. That was really good. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But again, thank you for having me on, Lee. That was very kind of you to share some time. And I don't know, I love talking with you anytime. So
I appreciate it. I think there's a lot of folks that are going to be glad that, they got to talk with you. It might, there's only 40,000 downloads, so there are 50,000 downloads now, something like that. So it's light audience, nobody's going to know. It's our secret. All right. Great. Thanks again, Jesse. Continue to do great things in this world, brother.
Thank you. You as well. Take care, Lee.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @Unleashing Leaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.